What is a family? It seems like such a simple question, doesn't it?
It really does.
But what you might not realize is that our whole understanding of family, it's deeply shaped by some really powerful sociological ideas,
Yeah.
often without us even noticing.
Mm-hmm.
So today, we're taking a deep dive into your sources on sociological perspectives on families and households. We're going to unpack these core theories that give us wildly different ways of looking at the family, its nature, its role, its whole purpose in society.
Exactly. And our mission here really is to pull out the most important nuggets of knowledge from these perspectives for you. They give you this powerful framework up,
Right.
helping you sort of dissect current debates, evaluate things like gender roles, how we get socialized, even, the impact of social policy. It's all connected.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Let's jump right in.
Yeah.
We should probably start with the functionalist view. So if we think of society as this big, complex machine, how do functionalists see the family fitting in? What's their main idea?
Well, functionalists really view society as a system,
Yeah.
like interconnected parts, institutions, families, schools, all working together to keep things stable and orderly.
Okay.
And from that perspective, the family is absolutely vital. It performs these essential functions, not just for individuals, but for the whole of society. It's like a fundamental building block.
A cornerstone, you could say. And that brings us neatly to George Peter Murdoch and his pretty bold claim about the universal family.
Yes, Murdoch. Back in 1949, he argued that the nuclear family, mom, dad, kids, is universal, found everywhere.
Everywhere.
Really, that was his argument. He believed it's universal because it performs 4 absolutely essential functions for society's survival. First, the sexual function, basically regulating sex, providing a stable outlet.
Right, keeps things orderly.
Exactly. Second, reproductive. Pretty obvious, right? Reproducing the next generation.
Sure.
Third, economic, providing the basics, food, shelter, the material stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And fourth, educational. Socializing kids into the society's norms and values, teaching them how to fit in, basically.
That sounds, well, quite neat and tidy, almost like a checklist. But then Talcott Parsons came along with a more, maybe, dynamic view about the family adapting. This is where it gets really interesting, I think.
It does, yeah. Parsons, in 1955, he came up with his functional fit theory. The idea here is that the family isn't static. It actually adapts its functions to fit the needs of the society it's in.
Okay, so it changes.
Changes. He looked at pre-industrial society and said, look, the extended family was dominant then. It did everything. Production, education, welfare, the lot. Multifunctional.
Right, like a mini society in itself.
Kind of, yeah. But then with industrialization, the nuclear family became dominant because it was a better fit, more functionally fit.
How so? Why was it a better fit?
Well, think about it. Industrial society needed workers who could move to where the jobs were geographic mobility. Smaller nuclear families are much easier to move than big extended ones.
I see. Makes sense.
And also social mobility. Status in industrial society is more achieved than ascribed at birth, so the nuclear family allows individuals to break away from wider family obligations that might hold them back.
So it became more specialized, maybe. More streamlined.
Exactly. It shed a lot of its old functions. Education went to schools, healthcare increasingly to doctors and hospitals, even things like policing went to the state.
Okay.
But Parsons argued it kept 2 irreducible functions, absolutely essential ones. First, the primary socialization of children, teaching them those basic norms and values before school takes over.
The very basic.
The very basics. And second, the stabilization of adult personalities. This is a really interesting one. The family acts as this emotional refuge.
The warm bath theory.
That's the one. The idea is the family provides emotional support, relieves stress from work. It's like a warm bath that soothes you and gets you ready to face the world again. It's about emotional support, a psychological function.
So, taking functionalism as a whole, what are its big plus points and where does it maybe, fall short?
Well, its main strength is definitely highlighting how the family contributes to social stability. It shows the positive role it can play.
Okay.
But the weaknesses are pretty significant. Critics say it's deterministic. It sort of sees people as puppets shaped by society.
Right. No real agency.
Exactly. It also presents a very idealized, rosy picture. It tends to ignore conflict, exploitation, the dark side of family life, like domestic abuse. That's definitely not a warm bath.
A major omission.
Huge. And it's often seen as outdated. It's really based on that 1950s American nuclear family model, isn't it? It struggles to explain all the different family types we see today: lone parents, same-sex couples, reconstituted families.
Yeah, family diversity is much greater now.
Absolutely. And finally, feminists strongly criticize it as patriarchal. They argue it basically justifies the traditional division of labor man as breadwinner, woman as homemaker as being functional, when they see it as oppressive.
Okay, so quite a few criticisms there. Let's shift gears now, quite dramatically, actually. If functionalists see the family as this sort of harmonious part of society, the Marxist view is, well, it's very different. How do they see the family? What's their core idea?
Marxists start from a completely different place. For them, society is all about class conflict. The struggle between the ruling class, the bourgeoisie who own the means of production, and the working class, the proletariat who sell their labor.
Okay, conflict, not harmony.
Right. And from this perspective, the family isn't some neutral building block for stability. They argue it's an institution that primarily serves the interests of capitalism.
How does it do that? How does the family serve capitalism?
Well, one key idea comes from Friedrich Engels, Marx's collaborator. Back in 1884, he argued that the monogamous nuclear family actually emerged with capitalism and private property.
Why then?
Because men, particularly wealthy men, needed to ensure their property was passed down to their legitimate heirs. They needed certainty about paternity.
So it's about inheritance.
Exactly. Engels called this the historical defeat of women because it essentially tied women to men, confined them to the home to ensure paternity, and restricted their sexuality. It served the needs of property owners.
And once that structure is in place, how does it, pass on capitalist ideas, almost sneakily?
Yeah, that's where thinkers like Louis Althusser come in. He talked about the family being an ideological state apparatus, an IHE.
Okay, what does that mean?
It means the family isn't just reproducing children, it's reproducing the ideology of capitalism. It socializes kids to accept hierarchy, obedience to authority, consumerism, all the values that keep the capitalist system going.
So teaching kids to just accept their place.
Pretty much. It helps create what Marxists call false consciousness, where the working class accepts the capitalist system as fair or inevitable, even though it exploits them. The family plays a key role in instilling that acceptance from a young age.
But hang on, isn't the family meant to be, a safe place, a haven from the nasty world of work and exploitation? Is that just an illusion?
Well, that's exactly what Eli Zaretsky argued in 1976. He talked about this idea of the family as a haven in a heartless world.
Right.
He acknowledged that, yeah, the family can feel like a private refuge from the alienation and exploitation of work under capitalism. But crucially, he said this illusion of a haven actually helps prop up capitalism.
How? By making things bearable.
Precisely. It makes the daily grind tolerable. It makes workers feel they have this private space where they can be themselves, which stops them questioning the system or, starting a revolution. It acts like a safety valve.
And it consumes things too, right?
Absolutely. The family is a major unit of consumption. It buys all the goods and services that capitalist factories produce, driving profits. So it serves capitalism both ideologically and economically.
What about women specifically? How do they fit into this Marxist picture?
Marxists often point to women functioning as a reserve army of labor.
A reserve army.
Yeah, meaning they can be pulled into the paid workforce when capitalism needs extra labor, like during economic booms or wars, and then pushed back into the home to do unpaid domestic work when they're not needed, like during recessions.
So flexible labor for capitalism, basically.
Exactly. Cheap, flexible labor that doesn't need to be supported when the economy slows down. It keeps wages down for male workers, too.
Okay, so if we try and sum up the Marxist view, what are its main strengths and weaknesses? What does it really highlight?
Well, its major strength is definitely showing the connection between the family and the economy. It really highlights how family structures and experiences are shaped by the wider capitalist system, by economic needs.
It puts it in that bigger context.
Exactly. But it has weaknesses, too. It's often accused of economic determinism, focusing too much on economics and class, and maybe downplaying other factors like patriarchy or ethnicity or religion.
Right, like everything boils down to money.
Kind of.
Yeah.
It also tends to ignore family diversity, often just assuming the traditional nuclear family is the norm under capitalism, which isn't always true. It's like functionalism. Some argue it's too deterministic, seeing family members as just passive puppets of capitalism, rather than people who make choices and shape their own lives.
And what about the feminist critique you mentioned earlier?
Yes, that's a big one. Many feminists argue that Marxism focuses too much on class and neglects patriarchy as a distinct system of oppression. They'd say women's oppression isn't just about capitalism, it's about male power, which exists in non-capitalist societies too. Reducing it all to class exploitation misses the point for them.
Okay, that leads us perfectly into our next perspective.
Yeah.
Feminism. This directly challenges quite a bit of what we've heard. What's the core feminist idea about the family?
The core idea for feminists is that society is fundamentally patriarchal. That means it's male-dominated, structured by male power over women,
Yeah.
and they see the family as a absolutely key institution in maintaining and reproducing that patriarchy.
So not a haven, not just serving capitalism, but actively oppressing women.
That's the central argument, yes. It benefits men at women's expense.
And it's important to remember, like you hinted, there isn't just one feminism, right? There are different strands.
Absolutely crucial. There are several different approaches. You've got liberal feminism, for instance. They focus mostly on achieving equality through legal reforms and changing attitudes.
Like equal pay laws or shared parental leave.
Exactly. They want to reform the existing system to make it fairer for women within the family and society. They don't necessarily want to overthrow the whole structure.
Okay. Then there's Marxist feminism.
Right. Marxist feminists try to combine insights from both Marxism and feminism. They argue women's oppression serves capitalism. How? Through unpaid domestic labor, cooking, cleaning, childcare, which reproduces the workforce for capitalism for free.
Right. Keeping the current and future workers going.
Yes, and also by women acting as absorbers of men's frustration. The man comes home stressed from his exploited job, takes it out on his wife, she absorbs it, preventing him from challenging the boss or the system.
So women are doing the economic heavy lifting at home and acting as an emotional shock absorber.
That's the argument. Then you have radical feminism, which is perhaps the most radical. They see patriarchy as the most fundamental form of inequality, even more basic than class.
More fundamental than capitalism.
Yes. They believe patriarchy existed before capitalism and persists across different economic systems. For them, the heterosexual nuclear family is the key patriarchal institution. It's the primary site of women's oppression.
How so? What specific things do they point to?
They highlight things like the dual burden, women doing paid work, and the bulk of housework and childcare. Some talk about the triple shift, adding emotional work, managing feelings, keeping everyone happy onto that.
That sounds exhausting.
It is. Radical feminists also really brought the issue of domestic violence into the spotlight, seeing it not just as isolated incidents, but as a systematic way men exercise control over women within the family.
And what's their solution?
Some advocate for separatism, women living independently from men. Others suggest alternatives like metrolocal households where women and their children live together, perhaps with female relatives, basically challenging the heterosexual norm itself.
Okay. And finally, you mentioned difference feminism.
Yes. Difference feminism. This is really important. They criticize other feminist strands for sometimes acting as if all women share the same experiences.
Because they don't.
Exactly. They argue that ethnicity, class, age, sexuality, disability, all these things intersect with gender to create very different experiences of family life. A Black, working-class lesbian will likely have a very different family experience from a white, middle-class, heterosexual woman.
So warning against generalizing.
Precisely. We need to recognize the diversity of women's experiences.
So looking at all these feminist perspectives together,
Yeah.
what are their main contributions, their strengths,
Yeah.
and what criticisms do they face?
Their massive strength is bringing inequalities, exploitation, and the whole dark side of family life out into the open. Things other theories often ignore or downplay, they really challenge that cozy, harmonious image of the family.
Okay.
But they do face criticisms. As difference feminists point out, some strands can generalize women's experiences. Some critics also argue they present an overly negative view, potentially overlooking the genuine support, love, and satisfaction many women do find in families.
Right. It's not always negative for everyone.
No. And finally, some specific arguments, particularly maybe from earlier waves of feminism, might be seen as a bit outdated now, given how much gender roles have changed in many societies, with women's increased education and economic independence.
Okay. That's a really important perspective. Let's wrap up our tour of theories with one more. The new right. This is a more conservative viewpoint, right?
Yeah.
What's their core idea about the family?
Yes, the new right is definitely a conservative political perspective. They strongly, strongly advocate for one specific type of family, the traditional nuclear family.
So married, heterosexual couple, husband is breadwinner, wife at home.
That's the ideal, yes. They see this specific structure as the absolute bedrock of a stable moral society. And
Right.
crucially, they believe that alternative family forms like lone parent families or cohabiting couples, and also the welfare state, actively undermine this ideal.
Undermine it. How? What are their key arguments?
Well, they put huge emphasis on traditional values, self-reliance, clear gender roles, parental responsibility, discipline, and a major target for them is the welfare state.
Why the welfare state?
They argue that generous welfare benefits, particularly for single mothers, create what they call perverse
This is
incentives.
verse incentives.
Yeah, meaning the benefits unintentionally encourage behavior that undermines the traditional family. They might argue it makes it easier for women to have children outside marriage or reduces the incentive for fathers to stay and provide, leading to dependency on the state.
Creating a dependency culture.
That's the term they use, yes. This idea was famously pushed by Charles Murray back in the 80s. He talked about the emergence of an underclass, a group supposedly reliant on benefits, lacking morals, prone to crime, often living in lone parent households.
So they link family structure directly to social problems.
Absolutely. They see rising rates of divorce, cohabitation, and single parenthood as clear signs of moral decline. And they see these family structures as the cause of problems like crime, educational failure, and social instability.
And what do they suggest doing about it, policy-wise?
Their recommendations usually involve cutting welfare benefits to reduce dependency, promoting marriage through things like tax breaks for married couples, and generally pushing for a return to stricter moral values and individual responsibility.
So looking at the new right perspective,
Huh?
strengths and weaknesses.
Well, a strength, in a way, is its undeniable political influence. These ideas have definitely shaped government policies on family and welfare in places like the UK and the US.
Right, they've had a real-world impact.
They have, and they do tap into a genuine concern many people have about the importance of stable families for children's upbringing.
Okay, but the weaknesses.
Critics point out several major ones. First, it promotes a very narrow and arguably outdated view of the ideal family. It basically ignores or condemns the diversity of family life today.
Very traditional.
Very. It's also heavily criticized for blaming the victim. It tends to blame lone parents, often women, for social problems, rather than looking at underlying structural causes like poverty, lack of jobs, or inadequate housing.
So blaming the individual, not the circumstance.
Exactly. It often ignores economic factors. Why might someone be a lone parent? Maybe due to lack of opportunity, low wages, lack of affordable childcare, things the new right doesn't focus on.
Mhm.
And finally, much like functionalism, it's seen by many as deeply patriarchal because it explicitly promotes traditional, unequal gender roles as the ideal.
Wow. Okay, we have really covered a huge amount of ground there from the
Mhm.
family as this, stable system keeping society running smoothly,
To seeing it as a tool of capitalist exploitation.
or a site of patriarchal oppression.
Or even this crumbling traditional ideal that needs protecting. It's quite a range.
It really is. What's so fascinating, I think, is how these very different perspectives give you, the listener, a kind of toolkit, right? A framework for understanding and really analyzing family life.
Absolutely. They show us that family isn't simple at all. It's incredibly complex, a social institution that looks totally different depending on which theoretical lens you're looking through.
So what does this all mean for you listening? Where do you go from here?
Well, it raises some big questions, doesn't it? Now that you've heard these different takes, how might this change the way you look at debates about family policy? Or maybe how you think about gender roles in your own life or the lives of people around you?
Or even just how families are shown on TV or in films.
Exactly. How do these theories help you maybe question the idea of the ideal family that your culture promotes? Or even challenge assumptions within your own family experiences? It gives you tools for critical thinking.
Definitely food for thought. Keep those questions simmering away as you navigate the world. This has been our deep dive into sociological perspectives on families and households. Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you on the next one.